Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Toni. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for this next guest. I have Erica Ziel virtually in front of me. She's a deep core exercise specialist, and we're going to talk a lot about postpartum exercise and movement, and even how to kind of prepare if you are planning on getting pregnant, even during, and then definitely if you've had any sort of complications or side effects after pregnancy and you're trying to get back into your exercise routine, or maybe there's certain things that you're not able to do because of the birth plan that you had. She's going to really talk about what you can do and how you can feel comfortable and safe to take care of your body during a very vulnerable time and process. So I'm so excited to get into today's episode. Erica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Toni. I'm really, really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. The first question I always ask, it's a 3-part question. It's to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Okay, so as you said, I'm Erica Ziel, a deep core exercise specialist, as I have become to be known. My background is in exercise science. That's what I went to college for. And then I fell in love with Pilates and went through the entire training to teach on, all the Pilates equipment and apparatus. And, it was just kind of like one thing in front of the other. And then I discovered this amazing thing called fascia in our body, which I should have learned in college, but they're still barely even teaching that in the college education today. And starting to learn so much more about our pelvic floor and our deep core to just this whole new level, and just became absolutely fascinated by it. So I always going to say, my education is much more outside the box, beyond my bachelor's degree that I got in exercise science, because I just discovered I was to really learn what I really wanted to, not only about my own body, but to help my clients that I was, personal training and teaching Pilates to. And, I like to always look at the body as a whole, which has always been my biggest fundamentals of principles. We do not look at the body individually. We look at the body as a whole, and that is ultimately how we can enhance our health, our fitness, and just our overall well-being. And so that's kind of, long story short. I have 3 kiddos myself, and actually way back in college was really fascinated with research around prenatal exercise. And at the time had no desire to necessarily be a younger mom. It was just something that I found very interesting. And so I even look back and I was I did a lot of my research papers that I had to do something around pregnancy or prenatal exercise, because I found it so interesting and fascinating that during pregnancy, we could continue to work out. And not only was it amazing, for mom, right? It could help her to feel so much better, but it was amazing and really beneficial for baby as well. And since then, we've had even more research coming out about the benefits of, staying active during pregnancy. And for me, personally and professionally, what I've seen over the years is specifically about our pelvic floor and our deep core, and really learning about our body as a woman. And I feel like that time while you're preparing to become pregnant, during pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. And side note, ladies, once you've had a baby, technically you're always postpartum. And I know that's hard for women to understand sometimes, but so note when I talk today that if I'm talking about something and I say the word, postpartum, that it's not just for someone who just had a baby, right? If you've ever had a baby, what I'm going to teach and talk about today really honestly applies to all of you, because it really can be life-changing. So I started going just even deeper, right? And beyond just the exercise of staying active, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong. But I started recognizing on myself personally and with my clients, what I was really teaching my female clients through breath work and the pelvic floor and the movement we were doing was that she was having less aches and pains to even no aches and pains during pregnancy. And especially I'd have women that they would come she would come to me when she got pregnant because she had so much pain in her back, for example, before pregnancy. And during pregnancy it would go away because of what I was training her and teaching her, and she was just blown away. And then we started understanding and learning, wow, these women that I'm teaching this deep core work to was having, quicker, in the phases of labor, right? You have the last phase, which is the pushing phase of labor, was happening much quicker. And the goal is not always to be quick. So I was going to say that because a lot of women that are like, but wait, Erica, the goal is not to push baby out quickly. Agreed wholeheartedly. But the goal also is that we should be efficient pushers so that we're not stressing our body, stressing our baby, and causing essentially more damage to our pelvic floor than necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that also can really, really positively affect your postpartum recovery. So just really to get across, like it's all connected. And I just became so passionate about this because of the women's lives that are literally being transformed when we really start to learn so much more about our body.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love that. And I love that it started for you in college and then you're now a mom and you got to like learn it professionally and personally. And it's really, really awesome. You started to kind of touch upon the benefits. Let's talk about the benefits before, like implementing some of these exercises. And I do eventually want to get into the specifics of like what pelvic floor exercises would be. Because people don't think, when they think of exercise, though I've never heard someone say like, yeah, I'm going to do my pelvic floor exercises today. Or like, no, you're doing your legs, you're doing your arms, maybe your core and your abs, but like pelvic floor, no. Yeah. So I would love for you to kind of definitely talk to the benefits of kind of implementing it sooner rather than later. And then maybe help us to understand the difference, like what is a pelvic floor exercise? Because I feel like if you're listening, you're probably like, I don't even know. And even to go into like the deep core stuff too, because I don't think people I think when they think core, they maybe think abs. Like, I'm not sure where their mindset is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm happy to let's break this down a little bit. So first off, let's talk about the benefits, right? So, here's the thing is it's never too early to work to learn what I'm going to teach you all in a little bit. And it's never too late. And so that's a really, really important thing. And so let's talk about what your deep core is, because that'll actually help answer that question. So when I'm talking about deep core, right, a lot of times we think core is abs, like the 6-pack muscles, the obliques, right? And that is a part of our core, absolutely. But our deep core really is our entire torso, right? It starts from our pelvic floor, which is why I've recognized like so many conversations I have now start with, we have to understand our pelvic floor function because that is the base of our deep core. And we can't have optimal core function without understanding our pelvic floor. If some women are listening and asking like, well, explain to me what my pelvic floor is. Because I do get that. Because again, as women, we should know this. We should learn this, right? But hey, it's okay, you guys. I took anatomy back in college and I didn't learn what the pelvic floor was in college. And I took a whole year of intense anatomy and somehow they left that muscle out. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. So, okay, many times this gets addressed as like, okay, we're going to strengthen the pelvic floor by doing Kegels, however you want to say it. I don't know.
That's literally the only pelvic floor exercise I know that I've heard of.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go on a little tangent here and then we'll come back because this is going to, I know, really help clarify for everybody. So Kegels, right, is what we've all been taught to strengthen our pelvic floor. Well, the biggest problem with them is we've been taught to do them by like stopping the flow of urine when we're peeing, right? I absolutely tell everyone to absolutely stop doing that because you don't want to stop the flow of urine because that can lead to backup of bacteria in our bladder. And anyone listening who has had UTIs knows that like that can be so awful. Personally, I've had them. It makes absolutely so awful. Yeah. And so we don't want to be doing anything that could potentially be leading to something like that, right? And so that's a big misconception that's how we should strengthen. So just stop doing that today. The other piece is that a lot of women think their pelvic floor is like a size of a quarter, right? So we think of like, oh, we're going to put a tampon in and like, that's it. That's our pelvic floor is just that like pulling a blueberry up or pulling your tampon up, right? And the reality of it is that our pelvic floor is much bigger. And I always use my fingers to show a diamond. So ladies who are listening, like I take, my pointer fingers and my thumb, put them together and it's like a diamond. And if you think of like that is the base of your pelvis, you're like, whoa, that's like way bigger than just thinking of like a quarter size. So the visual to think of is if you're sitting down and you can like kind of feel some feedback on like the pelvic floor underneath where you're sitting, it's your pelvic floor really runs from like the your pubic bone all the way back to like your tailbone, and then your sits bone. So that's like the bony part of your butt. And I know some women are like, Erica, but I don't feel the bony part of my butt. I promise you they're there. So just kind of like visualize. If you need to, do a little anatomy search online, right? I love teaching this. I have a workshop or a master class that I teach where I show all this because I think we're so visual creatures, and when we see it and we start to understand it better. So when we start to think of like our core really starts at the base as our pelvic floor. So that diamond shape. So it's way bigger than what we have kind of been conditioned to. The other problem with Kegels that I notice with women is it can lead to an imbalanced strength of a pelvic floor, right? So where we might be really strong in the front of our pelvic floor, but we don't know how to activate the back of our pelvic floor. We can be tight on the right side of our pelvic floor and too weak on the left side of the pelvic floor. So understanding that our pelvic floor is not just a standalone muscle, but there's like different parts of the pelvic floor. And to also understand that for optimal pelvic floor function, we have to learn how to strengthen our entire deep core together. Okay, so that's like, hopefully helps understand a little bit what our pelvic floor is. Okay.
Definitely.
And so we can absolutely work our pelvic floor as a standalone muscle, right? But instead of thinking them as Kegels, I like you to address it as like use the word pelvic floor, because otherwise if you tell yourself I'm doing Kegels, but you're trying to think of it as this bigger like area, the brain can instantly go back to like the old habits. So I do a lot of like habit training with movement, right? Because we're trying to get out of old movement patterns. We have to change the verbiage we're using. So then what we want to think about as far as the rest of the core goes, the deep core, right? So pelvic floor is the base. And then we want to think the abdominal wall, right, is obviously part of our core. But so is the deep muscles along the spine. So is the diaphragm, right, which goes up underneath the rib cage and it goes all the way up the spine and underneath the shoulder. So I look at our entire torso as our core, and then the deep core, like just the deeper layers. And we have what's called fascia that goes all the way through our body. And like in the abdominal wall, for example, we have these like several like layers of fascia. So when I'm teaching women how to strengthen her core and her deep core, I'm getting her to become more fascially connected and strong with her body versus just addressing the muscular system. And so it's like a kind of a whole different way of thinking about training the body. And of course, if we're working our fascial system, we're also working our muscular system. But if we're just focused on working our muscular system, we're not always tapping into the fascial system. Does that kind of make a little...
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I feel like it might be hard because you're right. Visual aid is so important. I know your Instagram has a lot of great visual aids and you have courses and everything. So I definitely want you to give a shout out to that in a second. Can you explain somehow for our listeners certain exercises that would work both of those things, or they're common exercises that we could already be doing that we didn't realize are working our pelvic floor or are working our deep core?
Yeah. So one of the easiest things to start doing is really connecting our breath with our deep core, which the cool thing about that is like, especially for moms who are busy and running around, like you can do it in the car, you can do it while you're standing, you can weave it in any time of the day, honestly. So I can walk you all through it if you're just sitting or standing, or if you're out for a walk while you're listening to this, right? So, and here's the thing at the beginning of doing all this, ladies, is 99% of women will be like, Erica, I feel absolutely nothing of what you're telling me. And so I really can't stress enough the importance of being open to the fact that that's okay, right? So many times as women, we put the stress on ourselves, like we have to feel it. We have to because we've been so ingrained to squeeze our muscles and, draw the belly to spine and really intensely activate these muscles. But the problem with overactivating is we actually shut off our pelvic floor, and it can lead to a lot of that pelvic floor dysfunction. So if you think about just sitting up nice and tall and just take a nice slow breath in through your nose and visualize like you're breathing all the way down into the base of your pelvic floor. And then visualize that diamond that I was explaining to you. So those 4 points, visualize like they're drawing together, and then exhale and lightly lengthen all the way up from the base of our pelvis through the top of your head. So some women like to think like a string out of the top of their head, and just kind of visualize like there is a connection from the base of the pelvic floor up all the way through the top of the head. And then we can think like lower belly also kind of pulling up, not in. That's one of the biggest mistakes that we make, is the drawing the belly to spine, because then it messes up our posture and all that. So this is really, really, really important, whether you're preparing to be pregnant, during pregnancy, postpartum, because I see a lot of postural shifts that are taking place, right? And so, for example, when you're pregnant, you're going to still get that lengthening and lifting up, but instead of like, you're going to get a zipping kind of upward feeling, but you're going to think about lightly hugging your baby from underneath your belly, not around like the belly button area, but from underneath. And your belly will naturally go in a little bit, but it's just this like little tweak that you can do that's going to set you up for such better success during pregnancy to feel better, right? So your pelvic floor is just so important, that we learn how to properly strengthen it, and really honestly for all women, but it is even more, just as more important as we're preparing for pregnancy and through and after, right? Because that's when a lot of women start to really notice, oh my gosh, we've got weight of baby pushing on pelvic floor. And so we have more incontinence happening, right? Like the peeing of your pants, or after a woman has a baby. And honestly, ladies, regardless of a vaginal birth or a cesarean birth, you can have pelvic floor dysfunction, because during pregnancy, you've got weight of baby pushing on your pelvic floor the whole time. And so a lot of women think like with a cesarean, like, oh, I don't have any pelvic floor dysfunction. But in order to more optimally heal from the cesarean, surgery, when you can understand beforehand, like how to properly strengthen your core, you're going to heal so much quicker.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was literally going to ask you that, because you would think the perception would be, if you didn't give a vaginal birth, that you don't need this information. But like, that's such a good point.
Everybody needs this.
Yeah. Like that's literally, it's still, like, cause the baby's sitting on that. Exactly. Oh my God. That's really, I'm surprised to hear that.
So don't overcomplicate it, number one. But also like, just start being aware of, what you're doing and how you're activating your core. And then one other thing I want to be sure to mention with this conversation is the importance of learning how to release and relax through your belly, through your pelvis, your pelvic floor, and your hips, right? Because especially those ladies listening that are like runners, high intensity exercise, like I think that like that's great. And I have no problem with women doing high intensity exercise as long as it's appropriate for your body. You don't have pain, you're not peeing your pants, your back doesn't hurt, right? Those types of things. But especially during pregnancy, while we're preparing for birth, you really need to start releasing and relaxing through your pelvis, low belly, hips, pelvic floor, all of that. We're not pushing down. We're just like visualizing, like creating like space, right? And then we're also working to strengthen lightly as well. And then postpartum as well. So for women who have not had a chance to learn this during pregnancy, again, you can do this, but the learning to like release and relax and be able to just breathe deeper. Like one, it helps release stress. We tend to put a lot of stress and worry in our pelvis. But once we learn to release and relax, we can then connect better and like activate the pelvic floor better. And one of the biggest mistakes I see women trying to do is they try to activate, like, again, like I said, like with the, like really, engaging like the obliques and the abs, right? We want to do the opposite. We want to be lighter and more gentle, which is why I like teaching the breath awareness. And so really it's like, you can do this practice all the time. And you should do this, especially before a workout and during a workout, right? So if you're going to go do squats, for example, squats are not just an exercise to work your legs. They're a really amazing exercise to also strengthen your deep core, which includes your pelvic floor. But before we go into a squat, one thing you can do is you can do the light activation, drawing those 4 points of the pelvic floor lightly together and lengthening up through the top of your head, keeping that length and space, and then you lower down in a squat. Because what otherwise happens is a lot of women will just move through their squats and they're tucking their booty and they're rounding their spine, thinking they're really strengthening their glutes. And honestly, it can lead to back pain. You can end up peeing your pants I can't tell you the amount of times I hear from women like, yeah, that's why we wear black leggings, so that you can't see when we pee our pants. And I'm like, okay, whoa, we have to have a conversation about this, because that while it's quote become normal, it doesn't need to be normal. It shouldn't be a normal part of society, which is why I love having these conversations.
Yeah. And I'm loving just like it's basically a mindfulness practice with intention. And I just love that. I feel like this could be applied to basically anything, like while you eat, slow down, right? While you exercise, slow down. But like really, it's just maybe it sounds like whether you're exercising currently or not, incorporating this can be easily implemented.
Right,
and I think everyone thinks like they hear pelvic floor exercises or they hear like just exercise in general, and they think it's going to take maximum amounts of effort. It really just requires an intention and being mindful and aware.
Absolutely.
And that it's hard, like deep breathing and remembering. Every time it never fails. Like whenever I'm listening to a meditation or if someone's interviewing me that's like in the mindfulness space, when they bring up posture, when they bring up breathing, I'm always clenching, holding my breath. My posture's like this. Like I always, and you guys can't see it, but I was like, Archie, I need to be reminded, because otherwise you're just like, we're always holding our breath.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so like whether you're planning on getting pregnant or not, this is, I think, super helpful. Because it's only going to benefit you just to feel better in general.
And there are a couple moves that I do love, and I can try to explain them. But of course, video I know is easier. I do a lot of videos. So my two go-tos that are pretty simplistic to get women started are what I call pelvic tilts. And then you can move from that into hip rolls. And so hip rolls are we kind of know that as like a bridge where we're laying on our back, right? And we lift our booty up and down. But instead of just lifting up and down with a flat spine, we learn to articulate through our spine, which is amazing for our spine. Also really great to help us to activate our pelvic floor. So it can be really important and powerful for women to start to do specific movements to help to wake up her pelvic floor and her deep core, because sometimes the breath, you feel like you're hitting a wall and you're like, I don't get it. So no, that's normal. But like I said, just keeping it in your mindset can be like something where eventually it will start to wake up. So pelvic tilts is basically the very start of a hip roll, right? So you're laying on your back, your feet are just flat on the floor, your knees are bent. And what we're starting to do is we're just tilting and rocking our pelvis back and forth, but using, again, breath to move our pelvis and to help us we're using our breath to start to activate that pelvic floor and the lower belly, right? But without forcefulness to it. We have to be so gentle. And I find with women, that's one of the hardest things to initially do. And once you learn how to connect less with your body, be less aggressive, be less forceful. So one of the first things I'll say is, okay, once you start doing the movement, now do it 50% with 50% of the activation, right? And engagement. And then you're going to be like, but Erica, I feel like I'm doing nothing. I'm like, that's okay. You have to get into that, because it's to get to the deeper layers and to get into our fascial system a little bit better, especially the deeper layers, we have to be more gentle with our body, right? And so when we can do that, it's absolutely amazing how it can transform your life, and it can make all the other working out you do way more effective. And I find that time and time again is if you have the time, great, go work out for 30, 45, 60 minutes a day. But the reality is, especially for moms, that may not be her reality. And so many times we get this all or none mentality, right? Oh, we don't have enough time to do a whole workout, so we'll do nothing. And so I like to speak to women so that I want to empower everybody that even if you have 5 or 10 minutes a day, just doing something and having some of what you're doing incorporate this deep core training can really change your life, right? It's those little things. And I know you talk about this with nutrition too, right? It's those little movement practices with consistency that's really, really can absolutely change your life. And so much of what I end up working with is women who literally oh my God, I didn't realize peeing my pants when I run after I have my third baby was a problem. Everyone just told me it's normal. And yeah, I know like everyone else has that problem, but you can help spread the word that they don't need to have that problem. And I'll tell you, like, and I back this like wholeheartedly. And like when especially through my core rehab program, that's one of the big things we address is if anyone is peeing their pants, like we are going to nip that in the butt. And when you follow it, my program to a T, and I also offer coaching with it because I think that's so important to get on a call with me or one of my other coaches, is that we can get rid of the incontinence. You can reverse that. And it time and time again, it is absolutely, it just amazes me that our body has this incredible ability to heal, right? So whether you've had one baby or 6 babies or 10 babies, right? Like I've worked with women who've had a lot of babies and they're literally left with no hope. They're like, oh my gosh, I have such severe diastasis recti. Like I'm peeing my pants. Maybe she's even got a little bit of pelvic organ prolapsing going on and just aches and pains galore. And I'm like, we gotta like get her moving again, right? Because a lot of these women are in their mid 30s. Sometimes they're in their, 40s. I'm like, that's way too young. Like we should never have to deal with this stuff if we don't have to. Yeah. But I know that like quality of life, especially as we get older, because I also will work with women in their 60s and I will really see the correlation. So it's like, we don't always think about that in our 20s, 30s, and 40s that like, oh, if we're starting to have aches and pains and pee in our pants at that, what's 20 or 30 years from now, right? Knowing that like there's so much that we can prevent and that we can reverse, but as a society, we're like, oh, honey, that's just normal. You're going to pee your pants when you run because you've had 3 babies.
Yeah, like that's like, oh my God, I there's so many tangents I want to go on, but like disordered eating is normalized. Like people think that it's normal to intentionally skip meals and not listen to your hunger cues. Like people think it's normal to go on cleanses and detoxes and like exclude all these food groups. Like that is not normal. So if you want to join the happier club, we're over here. If you want to stop peeing your pants, reach out to Erica. Like that could be, maybe that's their normal, but that doesn't have to be your normal. Right. And I think that it's like, oh my God, I already am going to have somebody I'm going to refer to you. I have her in my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. And I know you wanted to hit on diastasis recti a little bit today. So
and you mentioned it. Yeah, no. And you mentioned it and I wasn't even going to try to pronounce it. So I'm glad you started because I see a lot of women talk about it. And, I actually had a client, she's no longer in the program. She graduated, but she struggled with that. So, please just speak to what it is and how exercise plays a role in healing it.
Yeah. So diastasis recti or diastasis recti, as sometimes it is pronounced. Either way, it's totally fine. So it is the separation of the abdominals, right? And it's very common with pregnancy because our belly is going to stretch and, something has to give, right? And so I had it with my third and again, remember I had a lot of prenatal education, even at that point and postpartum stuff. But this is where I was like on this journey of like figuring out so much to a deeper layer to help women. And also part of it was my own healing journey of healing from diastasis. And just speaking of healing for a minute, because I always want to mention this because there's a lot of myths out there with diastasis. So we think of like the abdominal wall, right? We think of everyone knows what a 6-pack looks like. There's natural little space there because what's that fascia that's between there is called your linea alba. So there's like a 1 finger width space that women naturally are going to have between those essentially 6-pack muscles. I'm not saying you should have a 6-pack, but just so everyone understands, because I get a lot of women that are like, Erica, my gap isn't fully closed. And I'm like, it shouldn't be fully closed. You should have a little space there. Like that's just how the body is designed. So when we're testing for diastasis recti, because women are like, how do I know if I have it or not, right? Or some women might be like, yeah, I have it and it's really bad. And I've told I had to have surgery and all that. So if you're happy, I'm happy to just like talk about all that.
I know some people get surgery for that's but that's a good point. Like, do you need the surgery? Is it a preference? Is it like I'm curious about that because
I'll tell you
without surgery.
Yeah. It is. So when we're kind of talking about healing and the testing for it. So number one, I do not ever test a pregnant mom for diastasis. Okay. If you're currently pregnant or when you are, what I always encourage my moms to do is when you're doing exercises, or even if you're getting up from the couch or getting up from your bed, you need to start kind of rolling to your side, activating the deep core, like I was talking about earlier. So you've got support of your belly. And then we've got to watch for what's called coning of the belly. So when this happens, it looks like a little alien ridge is like coming up out of your belly. So if you notice that happening, that's doesn't necessarily mean you have diastasis, but what it can indicate is you've got weakening and thinning of the midline of your belly, right? Which makes sense. But it can also indicate that you're really gripping in your low back and your obliques. Okay. So these are things that we can absolutely work with. And I'll speak to that more in a minute, but I always want to talk about testing because I'm like, do not even test, don't test during pregnancy. But know that there's a lot that we can do during pregnancy to actually start to heal diastasis. Then on the flip side, after having babies to test for it, right? And I have a video, I'm happy to share that if you want to put it in the show notes or whatever. But there's two things we're testing for, right? That it typically gets talked of like the width, right? How much space width-wise is someone feel in their abdominals when they test for diastasis? You basically go on the floor, try to activate your abs, and then you're doing like a crunch type position, which of course we don't do on a regular basis. I don't even love crunches in general. But it will test so you can tell like, okay, well, how much space do I have? But more important to me is not the width of the space of the separation, but is how far can you push your hand, or can you easily push your hand down into your belly? Because what that tells me, if you don't get much feedback when you go to kind of lightly test, and again, we're always gentle with our body, we're never aggressive. Like if you can just I get women that are like, Erica, I can put my whole fist down through my belly button and my abs. And I'm like, okay, well, it shows we've got a lot of healing opportunity available, right? Mm-hmm. And so what it tells me is then their fascial layers of their abdominal wall are really weak. In part because, well, one, they've never been taught how to properly activate that, right? We've only been taught how to work our rectus abdominals and our obliques. And it leads to tightness, which actually can make that separation worse. So this is where, like, if we go back to pregnancy, and I have women who will reach out to me, like say she's on a third pregnancy, right? And maybe a lot of times it's like, oh my gosh, Erica, I wasn't planning to get pregnant quite so soon. And I've got this severe diastasis. I just haven't had time to really heal it after my second baby. And she's literally like almost tearing up. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, what, is there anything I can do? And I love getting a chance to work with these women who literally like, I have no idea what to do. Like, is there hope for me? She'll go through my Knocked Up Fitness prenatal program, because I address so much of the deep core training. And once she is postpartum and she's at 6, 8, 10 weeks, where I'm like, okay, now we can test to see where your diastasis is. She is just blown away. She's like, Erica, my diastasis is way better now, 6, 8, 10 weeks postpartum than it was when I got pregnant. She's like, whoa, how was that even possible? And it's possible because what you're learning is you're teaching your body how to be more correctly balanced and strong, because we work on posture, we work on all this deep core, we work on your fascial system, and it's amazing. And then guess what? It makes her postpartum recovery better, and she can continue on through core rehab to learning how to just continue on, right, this path. Yeah. And the other cool thing about pregnancy is I always tell women, like, it is the best time in your life to learn all this, because you have a baby inside your belly. So you get this incredible, like, tactile feedback of the fascia and muscular system that you don't any other time of your life. And I see it time and time again. Women are getting stronger during pregnancy, but she's not working out hardcore. She's, moving on a regular basis. It's safe, it's gentle, it's effective for her. But it's nothing high intensity. She doesn't have to run. She doesn't have to go lift heavy weights at all. Like, I'll use weights sometimes, but it doesn't have to be anything aggressive or heavy. And so we have this notion that, oh my gosh, like, to stay strong, we have to lift heavy. And there's definitely a time for that. But during pregnancy, I don't find, I've definitely changed my philosophy on this over the years. I used to be okay with women lifting heavy and do the barbell lifting. But the problem now I see is the women that do that she ends up finding me after she's had her baby, and she's done so much damage to her pelvic floor and diastasis and back pain that I'm like, okay, I've changed my philosophy. And I don't tell women, like, I hate telling women like you can't do something, right? But I like to look at it in the bigger picture of health and healing, right? And if we can prevent some major dysfunction when really pregnancy is 9-ish months of your life, like, you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That strength will come back, even if you lose it, a little bit of it. But I actually find my ladies are getting stronger, and it's a different strength, which actually sets you up for better strength down the road. So
definitely. And I think that too, there's like, there's different seasons in life and priority shifts, and, and I'm sure every woman listening to this would agree, like their priority is to raise and birth the best baby they possibly can. And they want to prioritize that. And I think that's where they might sometimes get caught up in thinking, oh, they need to exercise too and all that. And I think at the end of the day, you're saying, let's work smarter, not harder. There's a time and place for everything. And if you're putting all this pressure on yourself that you have to do all the things, like really your main role is to just do the best that you can. And it's okay to take a break from maybe the higher intensity interval training or the strength training or whatever, which is just so interesting too, because I'm just like reflecting on how I feel like advice has changed so much when it comes to exercise while pregnant. Like, can you like speak to what women are able to do?
Yeah. So women, honestly, here's what like ACOG says, right? Is that you can continue doing during pregnancy what you were doing before. Okay. I also like to add on that for women who were more sedentary before pregnancy, you can absolutely start working out as long as your doctor approves you and you feel good and you're not high risk and things like that. And you're working out smart. And this is why finding a trainer who has a pre-postnatal exercise training like that. I have a course to teach instructors because I felt so passionate that like, we need to change this from the fitness industry because that's where a lot of dysfunction is coming from. Yes. So that said, for example, your higher intensity athletes, the ones who are lifting the heavy barbells and are running, right? There is a degree of which like, okay, maybe we can keep some of that in for maybe a period of time. But pretty much right away, she's probably going to notice she has to cut back her intensity, cut back the weight. And then we have to really start to listen to the body. And when our body is starting to say, hey, okay, I peed my pants on my run today, or I peed my pants when I lifted that barbell today, we've got to adjust. And sometimes it's not just completely stop that exercise or activity. Sometimes it's actually like, oh, let's reconnect with our core and then see if we were just not connected and activating, and then we can try it again, right? It's like, think of it as instead of, oh, I can't do this. Think of like, well, how can I modify it to really be powerful for me and empowering for me and my baby that I'm growing inside? So I offer modifications like crazy with everything that I teach. And I always tell my students, hey, if there's an exercise that just doesn't feel great for you, don't do it. And reach out to me and I'll help you find an alternative, because my whole thing is I want to empower everyone to move, but I've also ended up working and seeing so many women that have the dysfunction from the high stuff that I'm always like, is it really worth it to keep running the entire pregnancy? Maybe you need to stop running at 20 weeks because you start peeing your pants, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? We need to empower women. Like, it is okay to switch up your activity, right? I'd rather have a woman switch from that and do spin classes or something instead, because it's just not that impact. And so really we can do a lot of things during pregnancy, but it just comes down to listening to your body, because we could take 10 different women and they all might be doing completely different things, because one of them's on a first pregnancy, one of them's on a third, one of them's on a fifth, one of them's, like a professional athlete, one of them wasn't exercising before. So it can look so different for every single woman that we have to like not compare our exercise routine with even our next pregnancy. One pregnancy to the next can be different, and also with a girlfriends or a sisters, right? So it just varies so much. And I love talking. That's what I teach in my instructor course, is like to the variabilities, because it's so much more than just modifying different trimesters. It's like, no, what actually feels good for you?
Yeah, I love this. And I love that every time I interview someone that it's like outside of nutrition, there's so many parallels in just being successful in whatever field that that person's in, right? So like with nutrition, obviously, like so many people get so caught up in like what Susie's doing or what their sister's doing or what their mom's doing. And it's like, just focus on you, what feels good for you, right? And then also too, what I see common in my practice is people will, body shame themselves against older versions of themselves. And it's like, just focus on who you are right now. What did you accomplish in this current body right now? And like, how do we modify for who you are right now? And also who you want to become and who you want to be and all those things. But at the end of the day, your nutrition plan, your exercise plan is not going, even like your mommying plan, how you choose to parent, like it's literally not, and it shouldn't look the same as anybody else's. Like, it's great to reach out to experts and they can really help streamline that for you and like to get ideas and inspiration and definitely educate yourself. But at the end of the day, it comes down to you listening to your body, whether with nutrition or your movement or your baby.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like that's so much of what I actually teach through everything, is really getting women to be more intuitive and connecting with themselves. Yeah. And if you're listening, you're like, what is that, Erica? Like, that's all the more reason why, like, we need to do that. And I always feel like I love this time in women's life of having babies, and because it's just this amazing opportunity to have so much amazing personal growth and get to learn about ourselves and our body on a whole new level. And, postpartum recovery can look very different with each pregnancy. And, but there is so much that we can do postpartum that can really empower us to reconnect with our pelvic floor and do a little movement. And this is something, are you okay if I talk about like kind of postpartum recovery really quick?
Yeah, go for it.
That. I feel like it's so important.
We're going through the stages. We did pre-pregnancy, during, and now let's talk about postpartum.
So, so the early postpartum, right? We all hear like that. You need to wait 6 weeks before you exercise. Great. Absolutely. Wait to go back to structured exercise until you have your physician's approval, right?
And until you sleep. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, until that may never happen.
Like,
oh my gosh.
Like literally, no, I know, I'm joking, but like, I'm so like, it's funny because people are so eager to go back to exercise, but I would be just so eager to get a regular night's sleep. Like that's like the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah. So then you need to find a baby sleep coach.
Yeah.
Not my expertise at all, but I can help you heal your body. So in those first 6 weeks, right, there's a lot of healing that's going on. And I really encourage women to start to reconnect with her body and her pelvic floor. And I don't encourage women to do nothing. I really do. I think waiting until 6 weeks is not a good thing because we can lose so much strength, right? And so you've done all this during pregnancy to become and keep your strength and work on your core, that waiting until 6 weeks, like we lose our strength twice as fast as we gain it, right? So I always tell women, like, even if you have a cesarean, as soon as you can, start doing some of those pelvic tilts and hip rolls and reconnecting with your pelvic floor with your breath. Because just that alone, again, is very powerful. Like, strap your baby to you and go for light walks. Even if you're not like, again, the goal here is not to quote exercise. I like to look at it as movement. Movement is healing. We are moving all the time. And a lot of moms, they're having a second, third, fourth baby. So they're not exactly just sitting down, right? And you feel so much better when you get out and get some fresh air, when you get a little movement in. So it's not just because of the physical. It's actually more, I think, from the mental perspective. And it's helping us send us down our healing path versus waiting until 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden doctors go like, okay, you're good to go. And then you're like, okay, back to the gym. And you try to go do your pre-pregnancy exercise, which I do not recommend at all. So it's like those first 6 weeks, start doing things that are gentle and restorative and really healing for your body. And it's not like, again, we're not hitting the gym. We're definitely not running, ladies. So even those of you that are like 4 weeks postpartum and you're like, I feel amazing and I'm ready to go run, please, 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 I beg of you, do not do that, because I've worked with women that have done that and it ends up actually worsening diastasis and causing pelvic floor problems. So do not do that. And part of the reason is, right, our hips have spread. We have what's called relaxin in our body when we're pregnant. Side note, it doesn't just leave right away once you have the baby. It's there for a good 6 months. 6 months postpartum. And again, this is something that's hard to hear, but we have to, again, look at this as like, again, that time in life, right, where we're at. So even once you're ready to go back to exercising, we have to start slow. We have to be mindful. When our body's not ready to do a lot of high intensity anything, not even discussing pelvic floor, but just because we're tired, we've got a newborn, possibly a toddler running around, right? So you're exhausted. So if you go to push your body, you're going to just deplete what energy you had left. And my whole goal is for you to feel better with your movements. And so this is where it really a little bit can go a long way. So this is what I teach my moms to do is like, okay, we're going to start slow. We're going to start gentle. And for many, it is a mindset shift of like, okay, like I want to get my body back. I want to get my body back. And it's like, well, okay, we are in a totally different phase of our life right now. And we kind of just need to like be with who we are right now. And we're in this healing journey. And I really encourage women who want to run or do high intensity, like let's do the healing first and really make sure we're reconnecting with our body, re-strengthening our pelvic floor, deep core, working on our posture, re-strengthening our mid-back. Mid-back, it's really weak during pregnancy. And for women that don't re-strengthen that, it stays like that. That's where a lot of that kyphosis, that roundedness comes from, and neck pain and stuff, because we haven't relearned how to strengthen the mid-back. And so we need to do those things. And once we're really feeling stronger and more connected and we're nearing that 6-month mark, then we can start having a conversation about maybe slowly, gradually working into impact exercise. And when women who really trust me and trust the process and trust their body on that, when they do get back to their high intensity working out, because it's a gradual thing, right? Or they get back to running or lifting heavy weights or whatever it is, she's like, oh my gosh, like one, I'm stronger than I was before. I'm running faster and I don't have any pain. I'm not peeing my pants, like none of that. But it takes us to like slow down, and like that societally, it's like, we don't even know how to slow down. Right. But it's when you can just embrace it, it will really change your life. It really will.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's like when you have an injury, right? If you have an injury and you don't wait for it to fully heal and you try to, work out on that injury, I think of like a sprained ankle, right? Yeah. Like, it's just you got to wait till the inflammation's down, till the soreness is down. Like, otherwise it's just going to take longer to heal.
Yeah, it does. So, and if you don't ever really fully heal, it keeps coming back. Right. Yeah. And so why not take a little bit longer time, do it right the first time. Yeah. And you're setting yourself up for such better success long-term. And then especially if you want to have another baby. Right. Because then we're going back to like, all the shifts that happen during pregnancy. And I just like, can't say it enough. Like the pain and dysfunction that we talk about societally that has to come with pregnancy, and it's just because you're a mom. I'm like, that's a load of crap. Like that is so far from the truth. It doesn't have to be that way. And I've seen it time and time again because I've helped thousands of women.
Yeah, no, I
say goodbye to all of that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. And like that does not have to be your story. It doesn't have to be your story. You can get help. So, oh my God, this has been amazing. Before we share where people can find you, is there any like last minute tips or comments that you want to make? And then we'll kind of let people know how they could work with you or someone from your team.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind that I haven't said yet is really just giving yourself grace. Like just really being kind to yourself and loving. And when you can do that, and I already said to slow down, but when you can do all of that, you'll actually get better results. Yeah. And it can actually happen faster than you think. Because when we're trying to force our body to get these certain results, and we're trying to force this and force that, it adds a lot of stress that you don't need. And your body doesn't respond well when we force it. And so just give yourself a lot more grace. And stuff just happens so much easier that way.
So much easier. Oh God. Like we're all in a race. There's literally no race. There's no race. You have your whole life. Like there's an urgency in the sense of, you only get one life and you want to live the best of it, but like, there's no urgency, and like, enjoy the process. You will get back to what you used to do. Like your body is healing. I don't want to go on tangents about society and how they expect you to bounce back to your pre-pregnancy weight like yesterday, but it's BS. It's just BS. Know your body, know yourself. And it's like, you're supposed to you're not supposed to like be a mom that just had a baby, but you just had a baby. You're not supposed to look like you just had a baby. Right. It's like what society expects of us.
Just ignore all that stuff.
Just ignore it. Yeah. Figure out what you need to do for you. But yeah, this has been so great. So where can people connect with you, learn more from you, and potentially work with you?
Yeah, so you can always find me on Instagram at Erica Ziel. My last name is spelled Ziel, and feel free to reach out and ask questions. And then, of course, all my other information, my Core Connections podcast, can all be found on my website, ericaziel.com. And for those of you that are pregnant, I also have a website that's called Knocked Up Fitness, and all that. So pretty easy to find that. But yeah, we talk a lot. I've been around doing that for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm going to put all that information in the show notes, but definitely give Erica a follow on Instagram. If you're not already following me on Instagram, definitely take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your story, tag me at tips_with_Toni, and tag Erica, and let us know your biggest takeaway. If you know somebody who is trying to get pregnant, who is currently pregnant, who's postpartum, before we started recording, Erica had said, and I hope you understand from listening, that you don't even have to have had a baby or have a baby. It's still important to work your pelvic floor, and your core. So this could be really, if you're a woman, this is for you. So I think that this would be, helpful to share with anybody. And if you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Toni podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. All right. Thanks so much for being here. As always, I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.